يا حبيبي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا رحمة للعالمين. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا نبي الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا حبيب الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته to Maulana and to some of the participants that have joined us.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Jazakallah to Maulana for a short notice. I think we decided to do something due to load shedding. We don't know when this is going to change, so I'm handing over directly to Maulana to continue, and we'll send the recording later to the balance of the participants, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وبعد. ويقول الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فصل لربك وانحر. صدق الله المولان العلي العظيم وصدق رسول النبي الحبيب الأمين الكريم ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. All praise be to Allah, cherisher and sustainer of the world, and choicest blessings and salutations upon the Holy Prophet, Nabiyyuna Habibuna Muhammad Rasulullah
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Once more, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.
As advertised, it's part 2 of Eid al-Adha and sacrifice. And the whole idea, although Eid is past already, and to take another year, Allah spare us all for His mercy and His goodness, inshallah. However, the lessons of even 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, as we mentioned in the first part, is even fresher than the sacrificed blood as it falls from the veins onto the ground. So this history is even more fresh, and the reason for that is because our Aqa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam retrieved by command of Allah this history which was lost. You can see the Christians, they talk about Abraham and Isaac, whereas we talk about Ibrahim, Sayyidina Ibrahim, Sayyidina Ismail ala Nabiyyina alayhi salatu wassalam, as electing or as going through this particular trial, and of course the tribulation thereafter. So it can be many thousands of years old, but this is the beauty of Islam. This is the beauty of the Quran and the centrality of the person and personality of our beloved Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How he revives, resurrects, corrects, and makes things accurate. So all other revealed religions, their ideas, their books, their prophets, if really they are interested in the truth, then all they have to do is to come to the Quran, come to Islam, open the Quran, and they will see the true histories, the true spiritualities, the true beliefs of all the prophets that went before our Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam being the final in the sea. So for those who think that history in Islam has got a different definition. I make a definition, I say history is a lesson of the past to learn from for our present and our future. Let's just try to repeat that, and I think it makes sense. I'm sure any of you could have coined that one, because many of you live by it. You look at your parents, you look at your grandparents, you look at your siblings. There is a history with them. They can come before you, they advise you, even from the mistakes they have made. Some of them did bad things or weak things or unhealthy things, and then you in your mind say, but that person doesn't have the moral right, but that is wrong. You don't have to be on the moral high ground to advise, because ad-deenu nasiha, ad-deenu nasiha. The deen, our way of life, our religion, our Islam is mutual advice. So nobody can feel unworthy or say, no, I can't do it, I can't. Whatever you know, obviously you can't advise on something you don't know. But whatever you know, or you have an idea of, or you have an experience of, experiences also becomes knowledge. And then you pass that on. You tell people, look, that's not a good group of friends or associates or etc., because you can see that there are influences that are starting to come away. And so this whole idea of sacrifice on a very basic level within this context of as we talk and speak and live in our families and our society. Sacrifice there could mean to just listen to the good counsel of elders instead of pushing your own agenda, your own desires, your own ego, your own arrogance of thinking you know better. Because you say, well, these old people, what do they know? They weren't in the computer age, etc., etc. But always listen first carefully, try to act upon it, and then see the benefits. Don't immediately discount. And I've had a lot of young professionals, saying that almost they sometimes very silently, subtly look down upon their parents and grandparents because some of them didn't even go to school. They didn't even pass them at 4. However, the wisdom and experience they have gathered surely by experience and age many a times cannot be learned in the loftiest towers of universities. And I'm a product of a family, I'm a product of a history, I'm a product of a remote village in India, I'm a product of modern Western industrial um, knowledges. I've straddled the world of Islamic sciences and so-called Western sciences, and I can see many a times I myself am confused of which option to take because of the thorough manner in which education and knowledge is used to sacrifice our values in place of their values. And none of us can deny that we all stand across two worlds. We want to be good Muslim, but then the lure of the West, the structure of the West, so-called professionalism of the West, if you wish, I don't know what else, and then we hate it, and that's the truth. In our homes, what we hear, what we see, what we eat, how we interact, how we conduct our functions, etc. Yes, we do try. I mean, because it's that balance we try to create, and that is the test of Muslim life in South Africa, for example. So history is a lesson of the past to learn from for our present and our future. Why? Because we learn from our grandparents or from the grand prophet Abraham alayhi salatu wasalam, or the awliya kiram, or pious people, or teachers, anybody who's a carrier of knowledge and information, they pass it on, sometimes from the most unlikeliest sources. I've heard many a truth from a non-Muslim mouth because I use the Quranic filter to say, is this person telling the truth? And then we say, yes, it is. So you always, of course, balance it to Quran and Hadith because those are the only touchstones to separate truths from untruths or just simple information from knowledge that has light in it. Secondly, فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ, the idea of worshipping Allah or and imitating Ibrahim alayhi salam in the salah or our Aqa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam who instituted the Salat al-Eid, Eid al-Fitr, Eid al-Adha. Fasalli means follow the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as he recited the salah. So for those again who only want to celebrate the Quran without the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and sometimes say, well, we don't know which hadiths are sahih, which are manufactured, which are fabricated, which are weak, which are strong. Now that is a whole science on its own, but you get some upstarts and then they quote to yourself, no, this is weak, hadith is weak. And when you ask them, give me one classical text on the first person that started hadith studies of collating it and scientificating the methodology of collecting and weeding out from, say, 100,000 hadith, eventually 3,000 or more hadith which can be relied upon. And even among that, certain of the hadith cannot be used for fara'id, for fard. It can be used for optional prayers or actions, etc. So what this tells us is that there's also the historical and spiritual continuity. That means we can trace our beliefs, our practices, even our other practices like our Maulud, Gyami, or any other subculture or sub-Islamic cultural practice that may come from Cockney practice or Yemen practice, Sufi practice, Malay practice, Chinese, European a lot, yes, a lot of European practice. Our weddings is a brilliant example. Western industrial, Europeanized ways in which we look at the world, um, you know, subculture. That is fine. The Quran was revealed in Arabic, absolutely classical, pure, pristine Arabic, into an Arab language-speaking society. So the culture was appropriated as well. But there were Habshis, there were Ethiopians, there were Persians, and the Prophet ﷺ did approve of some of those practices as long, and that's the touchstone, as long as it doesn't undermine any of the principles of Islam. So how you go about Eid, instead of wearing a Muslim crop or turban, which is the Sunnah, from the Eidgah you are going straight to work. So you put on your pants, shirt, pants, jersey, it's cold, etc., etc. You won't be crucified for it. You won't be. Yes, it is excellent to imitate, but I would sooner emulate the spirit of the Sunnah, uh, rather than make it only the mechanical expression of the Sunnah, which is important. You first ritualistic do a thing and then it grows upon you, then it becomes part of your being. And it's not a ritual, it's a quality of how you do things personally between you and Allah, or between you and our Nabiyyuna Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, Eid al-Adha and other Eids, especially where the prophets and our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam established a firm foundation of its definition, its understanding, and its practice, gives us authenticity. So we know that our history is authentic. The beliefs that come there are authentic. The practices are authentic. And as I said, you can put allied other practices as long as they do not undermine. Like a Mawlud, you said, it's the dhikr of Allah and His Rasul. So we make no harm. Khatm Sharif, Garbi Sharif is celebrating Huzur Ghaus Pak, Sayyidina Abdul Qadir Jilani, whose tremendous knowledge and service to Islam made Baghdad the center of Islamic science, knowledge, gnosis, ma'rifat, you name it, it was in his institute, for example. So the other value of Eid al-Adha and sacrifice is the lifelong learning, and this is, again, I'm addressing all of our listeners. If by now, this is one formal opportunity, we are fortunate. We thank Brother Samir again over and over for putting all of this together. So this is a formal way, but still, there must be a book learning experience. There must be a formal class. There must be a formal, if not one-to-one, then any class. And I plead with all our listeners to please see to it that you take up one class, Arabic or fiqh or hadith, anything but Quranic recitation, tajweed. But be consistent, do it for a couple of months, and make it now part as a reflection and as a lesson, as a historical and spiritual lesson of Eid al-Adha, of Fasalli li Rabbika Wanhar. You can't make worship if you don't know how to make worship. You can't grow in the ma'rifat of Allah and the ma'rifat of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That means knowing Allah better and knowing the Nabi better if you do not learn knowledge about Allah and His attributes, about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his attributes and his mission and his life for that matter. I always prescribe certain books. Please take those books, read them over and over and over again. Ask Brother Sabir for a book list if you wish. So the idea of lifelong learning is also perpetuated from the celebration and commemoration of Eid al-Adha and sacrifice. And the sacrifice here means sacrifice of your time. You can be a professional, you can be even an alim whose house is full of books, but he can also be just sitting and not going for his book, repeatedly going over his works, which he must, inshallah. So then the third point is, which is sort of part of the points 1 and 2, the historical and spiritual continuity and authenticity of who we are, of our spiritual history, of where we come from, what we believe, and how we hand it on to the next generation, to our children, to our siblings, and they are in turn. So it's extremely important to commemorate these situations, because that is what the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam methodology was. He said, "Ballighu anni walau aya." Propagate, transfer inform, teach, socialize, civilize, whatever word you want to use. But he says, take of my words, of my ways, of my actions that you have learned and you have become part of you. Take it on and give it to further. Give it on further. So that institute of continuous learning and contextualizing, subhanAllah, that is why Islam is so vibrant. Muslims may be lethargic, but Islam itself, especially the new Muslims, the reverse, when they come in, you can see that they're just on another level because they intellectualize and spiritualize their experience of Islam. We, I suspect, take it for a bit of granted, and maybe that's why times like Eid al-Adha and other opportunities revive us to relook at our commitments and the lessons. And the central lesson is sacrifice. So we contextualize not just history, but we living by living the present in a very prepared and planned way towards one's future, uh, which is the Sunnah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all that tawfiq and hidayah, inshallah. The Abrahamic sacrifice by our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is also a commemoration. Our Nabi commemorates Ibrahim alayhi salam, and we commemorate our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So even Mawlid al-Nabi is a type of commemoration. Yes, the best commemoration means not to forget and to revive and to remind ourselves of our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is by following him, and there is a compulsory and a non-compulsory. Compulsory, Allah commanded, Ati Allah, Ati Rasul. Follow Allah and follow His Rasul. Don't ever miss out any of the faraid, of the fards. It's non-negotiable. It's the first door to knowledge, to spirituality. So we have to sacrifice time, we have to sacrifice sleep, we have to sacrifice our busyness. So can you see how the concept of sacrifice is not only of certain of an animal which is extremely supreme. However, it is also about giving of what we have to give. And for that matter, sometimes even if you don't have to give. So non-compulsory would be your things which you are not be caught up by Allah for, certain of the sunnah, certain of the nawafil, optional prayers, optional charities. Volunteering, for example, very sore area in our community. Sufficient people do not volunteer. They just do not volunteer. They may send their money perhaps and so forth, get into a class here, but true sacrifice. And yeah, I would want to perhaps bring up like, Alhamdulillah, the Cockney Foundation is there. How much of you have really shown deeper interest? You know, if you don't want to be an executive member, you don't want to be an ordinary member, tell them, look, you're a volunteer on standby in your area of specialty, burial, or learning how to make kafan, etc. This is extremely important. In fact, it's a fard kifaya. If some of us don't do it, the rest of us will be culpable. So the idea of volunteering, which means don't expect, not leave the money story out. Don't money you forget. Don't even expect a thank you. Don't even expect an appreciation. And there, how do you adjust? What is your motivation? And doing lillahi ta'ala. Again, we go back to Mina and we see why did Ibrahim alayhi salam take the knife out and put it on the tender throat of his young child? Because lillahi ta'ala. And we still use that words even when we do the substitutional sacrifice, when we cut the goat or the sheep or the camel or the cow, we say, Bismillah, Allah, Lillah, O Allah, تقبل هذا لك ومنك وإليك. O Allah, this is from you, this is by you, this is for you. Lillahi ta'ala. So another supreme lesson of Eid al-Adha sacrifice is this of Zildahiyat, as we say in Persian, for the sake of Allah. Even parents, don't tell you, I did this for you, I did this for you, you must appreciate because now the children are a bit rebellious. Yes, you need to tell them, listen, we also did some sacrifices, you also need to sacrifice. So, however, you don't have to make it in a way in which they feel that you're being uncouth or rude about it. But they need to know that they will not be able to repay one mouthful of mother's milk, even if they do everything in the world for their mother or for their father. So again, sacrifice has to be central in the interrelationships between parents and children, like you would sacrifice a kidney for your sick mother. And why do you not sacrifice when she is guiding you and telling you, listen, I really don't think those friends are healthy. Listen, I don't think this going out at night and coming back in the early hours is a healthy thing. Listen, the neighbors have got designs upon you, etc., etc. I mean, okay, we don't have to live in fear, but the home is the castle, the home is the sakaf, the home is the base, even if it is a hut, even if it is, as we looked in the early days, corrugated iron rooms leading off in a square with one or two toilets for 20 families. So they all survived. I've counted in location in that area near Avyadara, Mamuri, always some of those circumstances were. Those people are professionals, they are accomplished businessmen, they're global leaders in certain areas, even though it's a handful, but they came from those circumstances. And never forget your humble beginnings. Otherwise, if you sacrifice your memories, if you sacrifice your memory, uh, then you will become arrogant and you'll forget your authentic history. So what if you have a humble beginning? So what if you were poverty stricken? So what if you're not born of royal blood? So what if you're mixed race? So what? What is the standard by Allah? إِنَّا جَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. We have created you in nations and in tribes so that you may just understand each other, know each other, not use it as a deprecation, not use it to make a distinction, to have a superiority and an inferiority complex. And of course, you know that it's still rife in our society, but it is totally against. فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ. As you put the knife on that neck of that animal, sacrifice your ego, sacrifice your superiority complexes, sacrifice your ethnicities upon which you divide families and communities. As long as Allah says, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The best of you, the first class citizen, the royal person, the number one, the Brahmin, the superior one. I don't know in the Cockney villages if they've got something like that too, which they copied from the from the Hindu caste system, and it is wrong. In the Akraman, the best of you, the first class citizen, the superior chap or lady, is not the one with who is the richest or got all the gold or changes every dress for everybody. No, it's the one who is more close to Allah. Akram Indala was most fearful and love of Allah, because there is two relationships. When we are immature, we fear is used, and as we mature, fear develops into love. But that's another topic for another time, as we learn from the feet of the awliya on how to transform from fear to love. So, last but not least, I think we've got 6 minutes, is to show you that in fact, none of all this that we were talking about, this very verse, فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ, we would not have known about it. The Quran, as we understand, would not have come to us. None of this would have happened if there was not the supreme act of sacrifice by the grandfather of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Abdul Muttalib. Abdul Muttalib had a few sons, and he was being scoffed at because in Arabia, sons were everything, were everything. So there's no mean reason that Allah takes the prized possession of a father and says sacrifice. And of course, Ibrahim as you all know, survived it and its place, and therefore we substitute. We don't put our sons under the knife. We put animals, as they call it, substitution. Right. So then Sayyidina Abdul Muttalib, Allah then gave him many sons. I can't recall now. It's in Muhammad by Martin Lynch. Beautiful story there. You can catch up in detail in that. And then he makes a promise. He makes a vow. He says, Ya Allah, because he was a custodian of the Kaaba. he was a custodian, and he said, "Ya Allah, um, please, I will sacrifice if you give me a lot of sons, because that will increase my image and my power among the Quraysh and our custodianship of the Kaaba." So Allah, over the years, gave him, and it was 11 or 12 sons, of which the last born was Sayyidina Abdullah. Sayyidina Abdullah, as you all know, father of our glorious Nabi, Janabi Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and his mother, Sayyidatuna Amina radiallahu anha. So then somebody reminded him that, "Hey, Abdul Muttalib, you forgot your vow." And the Arabs, whatever else they did, their idol worshipping and this, they were very hospitable on the one hand. They also, on the other hand, never forgot revenge. But they were also very clear with when they made a promise, they would honor it. And when he was reminded that he did say that he was going to sacrifice one of his sons, so the time had come now. Of course, the women in the house are always stronger, and they fought. Although it was multiple wives, they all stood together because it was their children involved. They didn't say, "Oh, it's the last one, you sort yourself out." They all got together. They sacrificed the stephood, if you wish, or different fathers or different mothers' children. Of course, if it's one father, then it's not step. So they got together and said, "No, this cannot be. We must find a solution." So Sayyidina Abdul Muttalib inclined to their suggestion and looked for what they call a seer. Like, people who look at like the future, but they in those days they would take an arrow box, call it, I forget now, and they put arrows and they put the names or the like an istikhara, how we do in istikhara with namaz and dua. They would make like to find of the good in that intention or action that they want to do. And in this case, they would have written the names of all the 11 or 12 sons, and then you have to pull it out, and they would put blank ones in. And as you pull out, then whoever's come up, that person is then that answer, or in this case, that person is then sacrificed. But of course, before that, they were looking for this person, and somebody told them there is this lady in Medina, I had the name too, that she sees things, she sees people, and so they went to her. When they went to Medina, she had gone to Khaybar, and true to their commitment, Sayyidina Abdul Muttalib, after travel from Makkah to Medina, from Medina to, they finally got the lady, and they put it to her that, "Look, this is the promise I made, the vow I took by Allah, and one of my sons I would have to sacrifice. Can you assist us? Is there a way out, or must I do that?" And then the lady said to them, "Come tomorrow." Of course, pre-Islamic times, she went and did her istikhara, whether it was with sand and stones or looking at the sky or whatever. But that was just how spiritual things were solved in that particular time and part of the world. And she came back to them and said, "There is a solution. Gather your children, gather your families, put the arrows, put their names on, and as it comes, sacrifice. If it comes blank, fine, but if it comes with any name, sacrifice your camel, sacrifice until it comes clear." Subhanallah. They went back to Makkah Mu'azzama and they did just that. And they put all the names, including Sayyidina Abdullah. Every time they would pull out Abdullah's name would come 10, 10, 10. Allahu Akbar. Sacrifice you want to talk about? 100 camels were sacrificed for our Nabiuna Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's father Abdul Muttalib. And then, of course, at the 10th time, when they removed, it was clear and they understood by that the sacrifices of 100 camels was accepted by Allah, and that it was now safe to keep Abdullah alive, Sayyidina Abdullah, who was a young man. He goes on to marry Sayyidatina Amina, from which our Nabiuna Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is born. So Dhul Hijjah ends with sacrifice of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Muharram begins with sacrifice in the household of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Imam Hussein and the Shuhada of Karbala. And in the very genealogy of the Prophet, the supreme act of sacrifice. Our lesson, bottom line, is sacrifice whatever you can. Shukran. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Shukran Maulana. Shukran to everyone who attended. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.